You're listening to The Harmony of We, a space for remembering what we already are together. I'm Greg Kuiper, counselor, author, and fellow traveler in this ongoing field of being human. This podcast isn't about fixing. It's not about getting relationships right. It's about coming into resonance with yourself, with each other, and with the presence that lives in between. This is where the book Relationship, The Harmony of We continues, in breath, in story, and in shared awareness. Welcome back to The Harmony of We. Glad you're here for this week's episode. Over the past several weeks, we've been walking together through a series of ordinary moments. Moments that on the surface might not have seemed especially remarkable. A conversation that didn't quite land, a bid for connection that quietly went unnoticed, a text message that wasn't answered, a pause in the middle of an uncomfortable conversation, or a question asked instead of an assumption made. None of those moments would likely make headlines in a relationship. And yet, I've come to believe that our relationships are shaped far more by these quiet moments than by the dramatic ones. We tend to think relationships change through grand gestures, a heartfelt apology, or a romantic weekend away. Perhaps a difficult conversation that finally resolves years of hurt. Those moments certainly matter, but they are not where most relationships are lived. Most relationships are lived in the ordinary, in kitchens, in cars, while folding the laundry, walking through a farmer's market, sitting on a porch as the day begins to fade. That's why we spent so much time with Ethan and Maya, not because they're extraordinary, but because they're ordinary. And in their ordinary moments, we've seen ourselves. As I've reflected on the conversations we've been sharing together, I've noticed something. Every meaningful shift we've explored has begun in the same place. Not with better communication or with more information, not with perfect words. It began when someone slowed down long enough to notice what was already happening. We'll continue Ethan and Maya's journey next week. But today I'd like to sit together for a while and gather some of the threads we've been weaving, not really as a review, but as a reflection. 5 quiet turning points that, in my experience, begin changing not only relationships, but the people within them. Several years ago, someone sat across from me and said something I've never forgotten. They weren't angry, there was no emotion. In fact, they were remarkably calm. I remember, after a long silence, they looked up and said, "I don't think we've forgotten how to love each other. I think we've forgotten how to notice each other." I remember those words staying with me long after our conversation ended. Because they revealed something profound. Most relationships don't slowly disappear because love disappears. They slowly drift because awareness fades. We become efficient and predictable. We get busy. We begin responding more to our routines than to one another. We stop noticing the slight change in someone's voice and the hesitation before they answer. We fail to notice the excitement in their eyes when they're about to tell us something that matters. This isn't because we don't care, because we do it because life is full. our attention is pulled in 100 directions. Work, kids, extended family, things like getting groceries, soccer practice, the shuttle driving. And relationships ask something that modern life doesn't always encourage. They ask us to pay attention. Carl Rogers, one of the pioneers of humanistic psychology, believed that one of the greatest gifts we can offer another person is our genuine presence, our willingness to understand them without judgment or agenda. I've always loved that idea because presence isn't flashy, it isn't dramatic. It's simply attention offered with care. Think about someone in your life who made you feel deeply seen. Perhaps it was a parent, teacher, friend, a partner. What do you remember most? Chances are it wasn't what they said, it was how they were with you. You felt noticed. And when we feel noticed, we begin to feel that we matter. Perhaps awareness isn't the first step toward connection. Perhaps awareness is connection beginning. One of the most powerful moments we witnessed with Ethan and Maya wasn't a conversation, it was a pause. Remember a brief moment where Ethan noticed the familiar urge to defend himself and chose not to follow it. Nothing dramatic happened. We didn't hear music swelling. No breakthrough occurred. But everything changed because a pause entered the relationship where reaction used to live. The nervous system is designed to protect us. It predicts, it prepares, it reacts quickly because throughout much of human history, reacting quickly kept us alive. The challenge is that our nervous systems don't always distinguish between physical danger and emotional discomfort. A difficult conversation can trigger the same protective patterns as genuine threat. So we interrupt and explain, we defend, or maybe we withdraw. We don't do this because we're bad at relationships. We do it because we're beautifully designed for survival. The invitation isn't to eliminate those reactions. It's to notice them before they become our only option. Viktor Frankl famously wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose. I've always thought relationships are built inside that space. Not because we always choose perfectly, but because we're becoming aware that the space exists. What if the next pause in your relationship wasn't empty? What if it was full of possibility? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is allow one more breath before we speak. John Gottman spent decades studying couples, trying to understand what helped relationships endure. One of the things he noticed was remarkably simple. Healthy relationships aren't defined by never missing each other. They're defined by becoming skilled at turning back toward each other. Often, that turning begins with curiosity. We watched Maya begin to question the stories her mind creates. We've watched Ethan ask, "Can you help me understand?" Those aren't just better communication skills. They're acts of humility. Curiosity quietly says, My experience may not be the whole story. Hmm. And in that moment, another person's reality has room to exist. Relationships don't suffer because two people see the world differently. They suffer when we stop wondering what the world looks like through the other person's eyes. Can you remember the last time someone became genuinely curious about your experience? Just to understand it, not to challenge it or correct it. How did that change the conversation? Curiosity doesn't erase differences, it makes them safe enough to explore. One of the greatest misconceptions about love is that it always knows exactly what to do. Real love often doesn't know. Sometimes it simply stays and it sits beside uncertainty. Sometimes it resists the urge to solve and remains present while another person's emotions unfold. We watched Ethan learn this. Took him a bit, and he continues to learn, but he's sincere in that learning. And perhaps that's why his relationship with Maya has begun to change. He hasn't really become more articulate, but he has become more available. Brene Brown often reminds us that vulnerability is born from courage, not certainty. I think presence works the same way. We don't stay because we know the outcome. We stay because the relationship matters more than our discomfort. The nervous system relaxes because someone remains. Problem doesn't disappear, we just stay with it. Think about the people who have made you feel safest. Was it always because they had the right answers? Or because they didn't leave when things became difficult? Presence is rarely dramatic. It is wonderfully ordinary and profoundly healing. There's one lesson that has echoed through every conversation we've shared together. It's this: relationships are not strengthened by perfection, they're strengthened by return. Every couple misses each other from time to time. Every friendship experiences misunderstanding. It just happens. Every family has moments of distance. The question isn't whether disconnection will happen, it will. The question is whether someone will find the courage to come back, to say, I think I missed you. Can we go back for a moment? Help me understand. Those simple words often matter more than getting everything right the first time. Repair isn't evidence that a relationship failed, it's evidence that the relationship is alive, growing and learning, becoming. John Gottman's research consistently points to repair as one of the strongest predictors of lasting relationships. Strongest predictors of lasting relationships. Thriving couples don't avoid conflict, they become willing to return after it again and again and again. So I look back over these past several weeks, I noticed that every turning point we've explored has something in common. They all begin with presence. We notice, we pause, we find curiosity, and then we stay and return. None of them require perfection. None of them ask us to become someone we're not. They simply invite us to become a little more available to the moment we're already living. Perhaps that's what tending the we really means. not managing every interaction, not mastering every communication skill, but becoming increasingly present to those quiet invitations that appear throughout an ordinary day. Those invitations are everywhere. In a sigh that asks to be noticed, in a silence that asks not to be filled, in a question that asks for curiosity instead of certainty, and in a moment of distance that quietly asks, will someone come back? The more we learn to recognize those invitations, the more our relationships begin to change. Not all at once, but one ordinary moment at a time. As we continue this journey together, we'll keep returning to Ethan and Maya. We'll watch them succeed, stumble, repair, misunderstand each other, and grow. Because that's what real relationships do. But I hope something else is happening as well. I hope you're beginning to notice your own moments, your own pauses, your own stories, your own opportunities to return. Because the most important relationship we'll ever explore on this podcast isn't Ethan and Maya's, it's yours. As you move through this week, don't try to remember everything we've talked about today. Instead, notice one small moment when someone quietly reaches toward you. Perhaps it's in a question or a glance, maybe a story they want to tell, or a silence they hope you'll stay inside with them. Before you decide what to say, simply be there. Because sometimes presence is where connection begins. Healing begins in this space between us. May you walk in the harmony of we.